The howling winter wind carried more than just snow across the Montana Territory in December of 1883. It carried a promise of death for anyone foolish enough to wander the vast wilderness alone. Logan Vance wasn't a man easily shaken, but as he urged his horse forward through the thickening blizzard, even he questioned the wisdom of his journey through Wolf Creek Pass this late in the season. Logan pulled his sheepskin collar higher against the biting cold. At 32, he'd survived 12 Montana winters, but this one felt particularly vicious, as if nature itself sought to match the emptiness that had taken residence in his chest these past 3 years. "Easy, Rusty," he murmured as his chestnut gelding snorted nervously, steam billowing from flared nostrils. The horse's ears pricked forward suddenly, and Logan followed the animal's gaze through the curtain of white. A dark shape lay half buried in the snow ahead. Logan's hand instinctively moved to the Colt .45 on his hip. Outlaws weren't above playing dead to ambush lone travelers. Years of vigilance had kept him alive through the lawless years following the war, but as he drew closer, the shape took form, not a man waiting in ambush, but a woman, crumpled and still. "Whoa!" he commanded, and Rusty halted obediently. Logan dismounted, his boots sinking ankle-deep in snow as he approached cautiously, revolver drawn. She lay face down, her dark hair splayed across the snow, a trail of crimson stretching behind her. A woman alone in this wilderness made no sense. Logan knelt beside her, gently turning her over, expecting to find another corpse to haunt his dreams. Instead, he found himself staring into half-open eyes, their color a striking amber even in the dim winter light. Blood stained her side, where a crude bandage had slipped free of what appeared to be a bullet wound. "Help," she whispered, the word barely audible above the wind. Her cracked lips barely moved, but the sound reached deep inside Logan's chest, stirring something he'd thought long dead. His frozen heart skipped a beat. Without hesitation, Logan holstered his weapon and scooped the woman into his arms. She was lighter than she should be, too light for someone of her height. Her clothing was fine but torn and bloodied, not nearly warm enough for the Montana winter. "You're safe now," he said, though he wasn't certain she could hear him. Her eyes fluttered closed as he carefully positioned her across his saddle before mounting behind her. He cradled her against his chest, using his body to shield her from the worst of the wind. His cabin lay 3 miles to the east, 3 miles through deepening snow and dropping temperatures. Logan knew these mountains better than most, but even his knowledge might not be enough against nature's fury. The woman in his arms was barely clinging to life. Without shelter and treatment, she wouldn't survive the night. "Stay with me," he urged, more to himself than to her. It had been years since Logan had felt anything beyond the dull obligation of survival. Now, holding the stranger's life in his hands, his heart hammered with purpose. Rusty struggled through snowdrifts that reached his chest in places. Logan guided the horse through hidden passages between rock formations, taking shortcuts known only to those who called these mountains home. The woman's breathing grew shallower with each passing minute, her body trembling violently against him. When the outline of his cabin finally appeared through the swirling white, Logan nearly sagged with relief. He'd built the sturdy structure with his own hands after returning from the war, a sanctuary from both the elements and the memories that haunted him. "Almost there," he told the unconscious woman, dismounting carefully while keeping her secure in his arms. Inside, Logan laid her on his bed and quickly built up the fire in the stone hearth. The cabin was simple but solid, one large room with a smaller sleeping alcove, stocked with enough supplies to last through the harshest winter. It had been his solitary refuge for years. Now it would be her salvation. By lamplight, Logan assessed her wound. The bullet had torn through her side, missing vital organs, but leaving her vulnerable to infection and blood loss. With practiced hands from too many battlefield injuries, he cleaned and dressed the wound properly, his movements gentle despite his calloused fingers. The woman was young, perhaps 25, with features that spoke of refinement. Her hands lacked the calluses of frontier life, and though her clothes were trail-worn, they were of quality material. What was a woman like her doing alone in the mountains in the dead of winter with a bullet in her side? Logan heated broth from the venison stew he'd prepared the previous day. When it was warm, he carefully lifted her head and coaxed a few spoonfuls between her lips. To his relief, she swallowed weakly. "That's it," he encouraged. "You need your strength." Night fell fully, the temperature plummeting as the blizzard intensified. Logan added wood to the fire and settled into his chair beside the bed, rifle across his lap. Whoever had shot this woman might still be searching for her, and Logan Vance had not survived this long by being careless. In the firelight, he studied her face. Even pale and drawn with pain, she was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. It had been 3 years since Martha's death in childbirth, taking their unborn son with her. 3 years since Logan had walled off his heart, buried it deeper than the Montana winter snows. Yet here he sat, keeping vigil over a stranger, feeling the first cracks in that wall. Hours passed, the woman's fever spiked, and Logan bathed her forehead with cool cloths, murmuring reassurances when she thrashed in delirium. Near midnight, her eyes suddenly opened, clear and alert for the first time. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice stronger than he expected. "My cabin. Found you in the snow about 3 miles west of here. You've been shot." She attempted to sit up but fell back with a gasp of pain. "They'll be looking for me." Logan's hand moved to his rifle. "Who?" "Randall's men." Her eyes darted to the windows where snow continued to pile against the glass. "My husband's business partner." "Your husband?" "Dead." The word hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. "They killed him 3 days ago. I was next." Logan nodded slowly. He'd seen enough of the darker side of humanity to recognize the truth in her eyes. "You're safe here. Storms buried any tracks. No one's finding this place tonight." Relief washed over her features. "Thank you for saving my life, Mr. Vance, Logan Vance. Natalie Jenkins." She offered a weak smile that transformed her face, bringing color to her pale cheeks. "I'm in your debt, Mr. Vance." "Logan," he corrected, suddenly uncomfortable with formality. "And there's no debt. Anyone would have done the same." Her amber eyes held his, seeing more than he wished to reveal. "No, not anyone." Logan looked away first, rising to stoke the fire. "You should rest. That wound needs time to heal." Natalie watched him move about the cabin, this tall, somber man with eyes that had seen too much. His hands were gentle despite their size and roughness, his voice low and steady. She hadn't expected kindness in these wild mountains. She certainly hadn't expected salvation. "Are you a doctor?" she asked as he checked her bandage. Logan shook his head. "Fought in the war. You learn to patch people up or watch them die." "Which side?" "Union, 2nd Montana Volunteer Infantry." He didn't elaborate, and Natalie didn't press. The war had ended nearly 20 years ago, but some wounds never fully healed. "I'm from St. Louis," she offered instead. "My husband Daniel and I came west last year. He'd invested in silver mines near Helena with Randall. When Daniel discovered the books were falsified." She trailed off, pain flashing across her face that had nothing to do with her wound. Logan nodded. He'd seen it before. Eastern money lured west by promises of riches, only to fall victim to swindles and theft. Montana Territory was still a place where disputes were often settled with bullets rather than laws. "You need to sleep," he said, pulling the blankets higher around her. "We'll figure things out in the morning." But morning brought no respite from the storm. Logan awoke from his uncomfortable position in the chair to find the cabin buried in snow up to the windowsills. The world outside had disappeared beneath a white blanket, sealing them together in this small sanctuary of warmth and light. Natalie's fever had broken during the night. She slept peacefully now, color returning to her cheeks. Logan moved quietly, preparing coffee and a simple breakfast, trying not to disturb her. He wasn't accustomed to sharing his space, hadn't wanted to since Martha died. Yet Natalie's presence didn't feel like an intrusion. He was stoking the fire when he heard her stir. "Good morning," she said, voice still rough with sleep but stronger than the day before. Logan turned, coffee pot in hand. "Morning. Hungry?" She nodded, attempting to sit up. Pain flashed across her face, and Logan was at her side instantly, supporting her shoulders as she adjusted against the pillows. "Easy," he cautioned. "That bullet took a fair piece of you with it." "I've never been shot before," she admitted with a small smile. "It's not an experience I'd recommend." Despite himself, Logan felt his lips quirk upward, the closest he'd come to a smile in years. Most don't go looking for second chances at it. He helped her eat a small portion of cornmeal mush sweetened with the last of his molasses, pleased to see her appetite returning. As the day progressed, they fell into conversation that started hesitantly but grew more comfortable with each passing hour. Natalie told him about her life in St. Louis, her marriage to Daniel Jenkins, a man 20 years her senior who had treated her with respect, if not passion. Logan shared limited details of his Montana life, his small herd of cattle in the valley below, the trapping that supplemented his income during winter months. He didn't speak of Martha. Some wounds were still too raw to expose. By evening, Logan realized they could be trapped for days. The storm showed no signs of abating, and even when it passed, the snow would make travel impossible until it settled and hardened. He would need to venture to the lean to where he kept his supplies, the smokehouse with its store of venison and preserved goods. "I need to check on the horse and bring in more supplies," he told Natalie as he wrapped himself in his heavy coat. "I won't be far." Fear flashed in her eyes. "Be careful." The concern in her voice stirred something in his chest, something he'd thought dead and buried. Logan nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and stepped into the howling whiteness outside. The wind cut through him like a knife, but he forced his way through chest-deep snow to the lean to where Rusty stomped nervously. Logan checked the horse, ensuring he had feed and water, then gathered supplies from the storage area, smoked meat, preserved vegetables, and extra ammunition. The blizzard had made the short journey treacherous, and by the time he returned to the cabin, his hands were numb despite his heavy gloves. Inside, Natalie had managed to stand, bracing herself against the table. Her face was pale with the effort, but determination shone in her eyes. "You shouldn't be up," Logan admonished, dropping his supplies to steady her. "I couldn't just lie there forever." Her hand gripped his arm for support, fingers digging into his sleeve. "I need to regain my strength." Logan helped her back to the bed, aware of her warmth against his side, the clean scent of her hair despite days of travel. When was the last time he'd been this close to another person? The realization of his isolation struck him with unexpected force. "How long have you lived here alone?" Natalie asked later, as if reading his thoughts. Logan busied himself with dinner preparations. 3 years in this cabin. Came to Montana 12 years ago, right after the war. That's a long time to be alone." He glanced up, meeting her gaze across the small space. "Wasn't always alone." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "I'm sorry." "Been 3 years." Logan's voice was rough. Her name was Martha. "What happened?" The question was gentle, without demand. Logan hadn't spoken of it to anyone, had carried the weight alone as he did all things. Yet something in Natalie's presence loosened the words he'd kept locked inside. Childbirth. Lost her and the baby both. He stirred the pot of stew with unnecessary force. Doctor was 3 days' ride. Storm came in, just like this one. Couldn't get help in time. Natalie was silent for a long moment. "My mother died the same way when I was 12. I understand what it means to lose someone like that." Logan looked up sharply, surprised by the shared grief. "After that, seemed easier to keep to myself." "Is it?" she asked softly. "Easier." Logan had no answer. Until 4 days ago, he'd believed it was. Now, with Natalie's presence filling the empty spaces of his cabin and his thoughts, he wasn't so certain. Days passed, the blizzard gradually releasing its grip on the mountains. Logan and Natalie fell into a rhythm together, he tending to her wound, preparing meals, keeping the fire burning, she growing stronger each day, eventually insisting on helping despite his protests. On the 5th day, Natalie stood without assistance, moving carefully around the cabin. "I can't thank you enough," she said as Logan showed her how he preserved meat for the winter months. "Not just for saving my life, but for—" She gestured around the cabin. "All of this." Logan, uncomfortable with gratitude, merely nodded. "Need to check the perimeter today. Storms let up enough. You're worried Randall's men might have tracked me." "Precaution," he said, though they both knew it was more than that. Whoever had shot Natalie hadn't done so lightly. They would want to finish the job. Outside, Logan found the snow had settled to a manageable 3 feet in most places. The sky remained heavy with clouds, but no fresh snow fell. He circled the cabin, checking for any signs of intruders, but found only the tracks of deer and smaller forest creatures. From the ridge above his cabin, Logan surveyed the valley below. No smoke rose from any chimney within sight. The nearest neighbor was 10 miles distant, and few ventured this high into the mountains during winter. The isolation that had been his refuge now served as their protection. When he returned, Natalie had prepared coffee and was attempting to mend her torn clothing. The domesticity of the scene struck Logan with unexpected force, how natural she looked in his home, as if she belonged there. "All clear," he reported, hanging his coat by the door. "No sign of anyone for miles." Relief softened her features. "When do you think we could travel to the nearest town? I need to report what happened Daniel's murder, the embezzlement." Logan's heart sank at the reminder that their time together was temporary. "Snow's still too deep, week, maybe 2 before the pass is clear enough." Natalie nodded, disappointment and relief warring in her expression. "I should be fully recovered by then." That evening, as they sat before the fire, Logan found himself sharing stories he hadn't thought of in years: his childhood in Pennsylvania, his experiences during the war, his journey west in search of something he couldn't name. Natalie listened with genuine interest, occasionally offering stories of her own, her education at a ladies' seminary, her brief career as a schoolteacher before her marriage. "Daniel was kind," she explained when Logan asked about her husband. "He offered security after my father died. I respected him greatly, though." She hesitated. "Though?" Logan prompted. "It wasn't a love match," she admitted, staring into the fire. "I sometimes wondered what that would feel like to love someone with your whole heart." Her words hung in the air between them, laden with possibility. Logan found himself studying her profile, the curve of her jaw, the way the firelight caught in her amber eyes, the small scar near her temple that he hadn't noticed before. "You deserve that," he said finally, voice rough with emotion he'd thought long buried. "That kind of love." Natalie turned to meet his gaze, something vulnerable and questioning in her expression. "So do you, Logan." The moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken feelings. Logan looked away first, rising to add wood to the fire. His hands trembled slightly, not from cold, but from the unfamiliar sensation of his heart thawing after years of careful numbness. On the 10th day, disaster struck. Logan had ventured farther from the cabin, checking trap lines and hunting fresh meat. The day was clear, the sun glinting off snow so brilliantly it hurt the eyes. He'd shot a young buck and was field dressing it when he heard the distant crack of a rifle. His blood ran cold. The shot had come from the direction of his cabin. Abandoning his kill, Logan mounted Rusty and rode hard through the snow, taking risks he normally wouldn't with the treacherous footing. As he crested the final ridge, he saw them 3 riders circling his cabin, one dismounting to approach the door. Logan didn't hesitate. He raised his Winchester to his shoulder and fired a warning shot that kicked up snow at the lead rider's feet. The man jerked back, spinning to locate the source of the shot. "Next one goes through you," Logan called out, his voice carrying across the distance. "Back away from the cabin." The dismounted man drew his pistol. "This ain't your concern, mister. We've just come for the woman." "She's under my protection," Logan replied, working the lever of his rifle to chamber another round. "That makes it my concern." The three men exchanged glances, clearly weighing their options. They hadn't expected resistance, certainly not from a skilled marksman with the high ground advantage. "Randall wants her dead," the lead man called back. "She knows too much. He's offering $500. "Not enough to die for," Logan answered coldly. "And that's what'll happen if you take one more step toward that cabin." For a tense moment, Logan thought they would risk it. Then the leader jerked his head, and the dismounted man returned to his horse. "This ain't over," the leader warned. "Randall don't give up easy." "Neither do I." Logan kept his rifle trained on them as they backed their horses away. Only when they had disappeared down the trail did Logan ride to the cabin. He burst through the door to find Natalie pressed against the wall beside the window, his spare pistol clutched in her hands. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, crossing the room in 3 strides. She shook her head, lowering the gun. "They didn't get inside. I heard them coming and hid." Her hands were steady, but fear lingered in her eyes. "I was afraid you wouldn't return in time." Without thinking, Logan pulled her into his arms, relief overwhelming his usual reserve. Natalie stiffened in surprise before melting against him, her face pressed to his chest. "I thought they might kill you," she whispered. Logan held her tighter. "Takes more than 3 hired guns to do that." They remained like that, hearts beating in tandem, until Logan reluctantly stepped back. "They'll be back with more men next time." Natalie nodded, her expression resolute despite her fear. "What do we do?" "We leave, tonight." Logan moved to gather supplies. "They'll expect us to stay put, wait out the weather. We'll head north through the high country. I know places they won't think to look." "Where will we go?" "Fort Benton. The marshal there is a good man. He'll hear your story, help make a case against Randall." They worked together through the afternoon, preparing for the journey. Logan packed provisions, ammunition, and medical supplies, while Natalie bundled her meager belongings. By dusk, they were ready. Logan led Rusty in the pack horse he kept for supply runs from the lean-to. The night was clear and cold, stars emerging as twilight deepened. If they traveled through the night, they could put significant distance between themselves and any pursuers. "Can you ride?" Logan asked as he helped Natalie into her borrowed coat, one of his old ones that engulfed her smaller frame. "I grew up riding," she assured him. "My wound is healing well enough." Logan hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch. From it, he removed a simple gold band. "Martha's," he explained, holding it out to her. "If anyone asks, we're married. Traveling man and wife draws less attention than—" He trailed off, awkward suddenly. Natalie understood. A man and woman traveling together unmarried would raise questions they couldn't afford. She slipped the ring onto her finger, the metal cold against her skin. "Thank you," she said softly, recognizing the significance of his gesture. Martha's ring had likely remained untouched in that pouch for 3 years. They rode north through moonlit forests, following game trails and hidden passages Logan had discovered during his years in the mountains. Natalie proved to be a capable rider despite her injury, never complaining even when pain etched lines around her mouth. By dawn, they had covered nearly 15 miles of difficult terrain. Logan led them to a small hunter's cabin he knew barely more than a shack, but shelter from the biting cold. "We'll rest here," he decided, helping Natalie dismount. Her legs buckled as her feet touched the ground, and Logan caught her against his chest. "Sorry," she murmured, "stiffer than I realized." Logan's arms lingered around her waist. "You did well. Most men couldn't have made that ride with a healing bullet wound," Natalie looked up at him, her face close to his in the breaking dawn. "I'm stronger than I look, Logan Vance." "Never doubted it," he replied softly. Inside the crude shelter, Logan built a small fire in the stone fireplace. They couldn't risk much smoke, but they needed warmth. Natalie checked her wound while Logan prepared a simple meal of jerky and hardtack softened in hot coffee. "It's holding," she reported, rebandaging her side. "Painful, but not bleeding." Logan nodded, relief evident in his expression. "We'll push on at dusk. 2 more days' travel should bring us to Fort Benton." As they ate, sitting side by side for warmth on the cabin's only bench, Logan found himself watching Natalie's profile. The past 2 weeks had transformed her from a half-dead stranger to someone he couldn't imagine not having in his life. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. "What will you do," he asked suddenly, "after Fort Benton, after Randall faces justice?" Natalie considered the question, turning Martha's ring on her finger. "I hadn't thought that far ahead. I have some family back in St. Louis, but," she hesitated, "that life feels very distant now." "You could stay," Logan said, the words escaping before he could reconsider. "In Montana, I mean." Their eyes met, understanding passing between them without words. Natalie's hand found his, fingers intertwining naturally. "Is that what you want?" she asked quietly. Logan had spent 3 years avoiding anything resembling want or need. He'd existed rather than lived, moving through each day with mechanical precision. Now, with Natalie's hand in his, he recognized the depth of his loneliness and the possibility of its end. "Yes," he admitted, "it's what I want." Natalie's smile bloomed slowly, transforming her face. "Then that's what I'll do." They rested through the day, taking turns keeping watch. No riders appeared on their trail, but Logan remained vigilant. As dusk approached, they prepared to continue their journey. Outside, mounting their horses in the fading light, Logan paused beside Natalie. Without overthinking, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, a brief, tender kiss that carried the promise of more. "For luck," he murmured as he pulled away. Natalie's eyes shone in the twilight. "We'll need to make our own luck from here on out." They rode north through the night, 2 figures against the vast Montana wilderness. The moon illuminated their path, casting long shadows across snow-covered ground. Logan led them through narrow passes and along ridgelines where the wind had blown the snow thin enough for safer travel. By the second night, they had descended from the high country into the rolling plains that stretched toward the Missouri River. Fort Benton lay just beyond the next ridge, a haven of law and civilization after their perilous journey. "We'll be there by morning," Logan told Natalie as they made camp in a sheltered draw. "Marshal Peterson will hear your testimony. Send telegrams to the territorial governor." Natalie nodded, but worry creased her brow. What if Randall has connections there too? He's a wealthy man with influence. Logan built their small fire with practiced efficiency. "Peterson isn't a man who can be bought. I've known him 15 years, since before he wore a badge." As night deepened around them, Logan kept watch while Natalie slept. The stars wheeled overhead, brilliant against the black velvet sky. He found himself planning a future he hadn't dared imagine 2 weeks earlier, a life no longer defined by isolation and regret. Near midnight, Natalie stirred and came to sit beside him by the fire. Without speaking, she leaned against his shoulder, and Logan's arm encircled her naturally. "I never thought I'd find this," she confessed softly. "After Daniel died, I thought I was alone in the world." Logan's hand tightened around her shoulder. "I know that feeling. When you found me in the snow, I was ready to die." Her voice trembled slightly. "I had nothing left to fight for." "And now?" Logan asked, his heart hammering against his ribs. Natalie turned to face him, cupping his bearded cheek with her palm. Now I have everything to fight for." Their lips met in the firelight, tentative at first, then with growing certainty. 3 years of numbness melted away as Logan pulled her closer, his hands gentle in her hair. When they finally parted, breathless and flushed despite the cold night air, Logan pressed his forehead to hers. "I thought my heart was frozen for good," he admitted, "dead and buried with Martha and our son." "And now?" Natalie echoed his earlier question. Logan took her hand and placed it against his chest, where his heart beat strong and steady. "Now it beats again. Because of you." Morning found them approaching Fort Benton, the settlement appearing through lifting fog as the sun crested the eastern horizon. The fort itself had been largely abandoned by the military years earlier, but the town that grew around it had flourished as a steamboat landing and trading post. Logan and Natalie rode down the main street, drawing curious glances from early rising townspeople. After days in the wilderness, they were a sight trail worn and exhausted, but alive with purpose. The marshal's office stood near the river, a solid wooden building with barred windows. Logan helped Natalie dismount, steadying her as her injured side protested the movement. "Ready?" he asked, his hand lingering on her arm. Natalie nodded, squaring her shoulders. "Ready." Marshal Peterson proved to be everything Logan had promised, a weathered man with shrewd eyes and an unwavering commitment to justice. He listened to Natalie's account of Daniel's murder and Randall's embezzlement without interruption, taking careful notes. "This ain't the first complaint against Randall I've heard," he said when she'd finished. "Man's been suspected of claim jumping and worse for years, but no one's been willing to testify. Witnesses have a way of disappearing." "I'm not disappearing," Natalie stated firmly. "Daniel deserves justice." Peterson nodded approvingly. "I'll send telegrams to Helena today. Meanwhile, you two should lie low. Hotel down the street is decent, run by a widow who knows how to mind her business." Logan and Natalie took the marshal's advice, checking into the small hotel under the names Mr. and Mrs. Vance. The widow who owned the establishment asked no questions about Natalie's obvious injury or their trail-worn appearance, simply showing them to a clean room on the second floor. Alone for the first time in proper privacy, they stood awkwardly in the center of the room, suddenly shy despite the intimacy they'd shared on the journey. "I should clean up," Natalie said finally, gesturing to the pitcher and basin on the washstand. Logan nodded. "I'll see about getting us some proper food. You must be hungry." Their eyes met, and the tension dissolved into quiet laughter. "This is strange, isn't it?" Natalie said. "After everything we've been through." Logan crossed the room to take her hands in his. "Nothing about us has been ordinary from the start. Why change now?" Her smile warmed him more than any fire ever could. "I wouldn't change a thing." 2 weeks passed in Fort Benton while the wheels of justice slowly turned. Telegrams flew between the town and Helena, statements were taken, and eventually word came that Randall had been arrested trying to flee the territory. During that time, Logan and Natalie grew closer still. Her wound healed completely, leaving only a puckered scar as testament to her ordeal. They explored the small town together during days, and at night they discovered each other with tender reverence. On a bright March morning, with the first hints of spring softening the air, Marshal Peterson brought news that Randall had been indicted on multiple charges, including the murder of Daniel Jenkins. "Judge says your testimony will be needed at trial in Helena next month," he informed Natalie. "After that, Randall's looking at a hanging or life in territorial prison." Relief washed over her features. "Thank you, Marshal, for everything." When Peterson had gone, Natalie turned to Logan, uncertainty in her eyes for the first time in weeks. "Helena, then. And after that," Logan took her hands in his expression solemn yet tender. "After that we go home, if that's still what you want." "Home," Natalie repeated, testing the word. "Your cabin in the mountains?" Our cabin, Logan corrected, though it needs work if it's to be a proper home, maybe a larger bedroom, windows that face east for the morning sun. Natalie's eyes brightened with unshed tears. You've been planning. Every day since I found you in the snow, Logan's voice roughened with emotion. I never expected to find love again, Natalie. Never thought I deserved it after failing Martha. You didn't fail her, Natalie said firmly, reaching up to touch his face. Sometimes life takes from us without reason or mercy, but it gives back, too. It gave me you. Logan drew a deep breath, then reached into his pocket and removed Martha's ring from Natalie's finger. Before she could question the gesture, he knelt before her, the ring held between them. This was borrowed, he said softly. A pretense for the journey. Now I'm asking for real. Natalie Jenkins, will you marry me? Be my wife? Build a life with me in those mountains? Tears spilled freely down Natalie's cheeks as she nodded. Yes, Logan Vance, I will. He slid the ring back onto her finger, no longer a disguise but a promise. As he rose to kiss her, Logan marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a half-frozen woman dying in the snow to the love of his life, Natalie had transformed not just his future, but his heart. That summer, after justice had been served and Randall sentenced to hang for his crimes, Logan and Natalie returned to the cabin in the mountains. True to his word, Logan expanded their home, adding rooms and windows that welcomed the morning sun. By their first anniversary, a small garden grew beside the cabin, and Natalie had established a relationship with the nearest town 20 miles away, where she occasionally taught at the small schoolhouse. Logan's cattle herd flourished under their joint care, and for the first time in years, laughter echoed through the mountain valleys. On a December evening, 3 years after he'd found her in the snow, Logan held their infant daughter in his arms while Natalie prepared dinner. The child they'd named her Hope had her mother's amber eyes and her father's determined chin. "Do you ever think about that day?" Natalie asked, catching Logan's reflective expression as he gazed down at their daughter. "When you found me?" Logan nodded, reaching out to draw his wife against his side so the three of them stood wrapped in a single embrace. "Every day," he admitted. "It was the day my heart started beating again." Outside, snow began to fall. Gentle and silent against the windows of their home. But inside, all was warmth and light and love-proof that even the coldest heart could thaw, given the right whispered words from the right person's lips.